Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Belpod, the podcast dedicated to Belarusian football. Part 1 today is dedicated to Shakhtyor Soligorsk's successful title defence and our thoughts on what the future might hold for them. Part 2 features an interview with former Vitebsk defender Daniel Chalov, but the bulk of the show is dedicated to our thoughts on the 3 issues still to be resolved, with 2 weeks of the season still remaining, namely the race for European qualification, the fight to avoid the relegation playoff place, and the battle for a top 3 finish in the Pashaya Liga. Hello again. Don't worry, we're still here, still watching. It's been a while, but we love it as much as ever, don't we, John?
Absolutely.
And obviously, the biggest development, I suppose, although it was inevitable since we last recorded, is the formal coronation of Shakhtyor as champions. And I suppose, really, for me, John, it was that win and the manner in which they won the league on that very particular day that said to me, this is a team that just can deal with anything, basically. I don't know what you felt the game down in Gomel. That was my reading of it.
Well, you're right, it was a high point of the season. Of course, Shakhtyor had an abysmal start to the game, going behind in the first minute. And at that point, you thought, well, they might just get filled in tonight. But of course, it didn't turn out like that. They worked really, really hard. There was a major scuffle just before half-time involving Gutor, which I think riled the Gomel players quite a bit. Gomel were way in the ascendancy in first half in the game and should have been much further in front than they were. And I think they had cause to regret only being 1-0 up at half-time. And in the second half, you had Filipenko equalising, Maxim Skavish pushing them ahead, Pobude scoring virtually from the restart, and the game really finally poised at 2-2. And then right at the death, there's this Filipenko goal stroke Chiquita own goal that was the final goal that won the title for Shakhtyor. And I agree with you, Liam. It shows a side that can grind out a result even when it's not playing particularly well. A side that knows how to wait its turn to strike in a game. They knew that Gomel would tire. They knew Gomel are weak defensively, which is something that Beyond Chick will want to address in the close season. And they scored at just the right time. And they had a tremendous will to win, which was absent during the Gurenko period. So yes, you have to take your hat off to Shakhtyor and say almost on that performance alone, they showed that they were worthy champions of a league that, let's not forget, whilst Grigorchuk was in charge, they were absolutely dominating anyway.
Yes, as it was inevitable, I think, from very early on in the season, wasn't it, that they win it? But as you say, I think the fact that a couple of the big games they played with Baga before, they got off to a fast start, hadn't they? They'd really kind of blown the opponents away in the first 20 minutes, whereas this game was one of those where they got a bit blown away. They hung on in there, and then, as you say, they struck when they needed to after the break. And interesting that I think the winning goal that sealed the title was again in injury time, which is a nice little mirror of last season's, isn't it? Although obviously not quite as dramatic. But talking of this team, we think it's going to look quite different next year, don't we? There's certainly suggestions that a number will be on their way. And perhaps also important to reflect on whether they'll have quite so much money to spend next year, judging by what we're hearing about their owners, basically.
Yeah, it is interesting. We know already that Julius Zsirka, the Hungarian, is away back home, I think, to play in the Hungarian league, although he does have offers from elsewhere. But he won't play for Shakhtyor again. He's done there. Nikola Antic, the gangling Serbian centre-half, who's been such a feature of Shakhtyor in the last couple of seasons. He also wants away and is 99% certain to go. I don't think he ever really recovered from being sent to Siberia during Gurenko's period. Dembo Darbo is again 99% certain to be away. He had an interview with the Football Federation's website this season saying that his goal was to reach one of the top 5 leagues in Europe and cement his place in the Gambia international team. So I'd be astonished if he's still in Soligorsk next season. And even Liam, the manager, Alexei Baga, who's so impressively come in and just calmed down a very querulous situation and got everyone pulling in the same direction again. He's been pressed in recent weeks by Tribuna, by Football BY, and other outlets as to whether he'll still be there next season. And he's been very coy. He's saying, well, let's see how the season ends, and then we'll see what offer the management puts on the table, whilst at the same time speaking very favourably about the infrastructure at Shakhtyor. So it's all up in the air, really. We also know that Belarus Kali are not paying contractors at the moment. They haven't paid for a couple of months. And that sounds a warning bell about the financial state of the company. There's also quite a detailed investigation that they still owe a hotel in Hungary 13,000 euros plus for a stay they had there during their ill-starred European ventures this season. So, although Baga's come in and done a great job on the playing side, there's clearly a lot of infrastructure and behind-the-scenes challenges that need to be met by the club.
I'm presuming that's one of the reasons why he's keeping his cards close to his chest, isn't he? Waiting to see how things play out and whether there will be the sort of budget that he requires. I suppose they'll still start next season as favourites, though, won't they, John? Although we don't really talk about next season before this one's over, but
Well, true. And having nominated Dynamo Minsk and smashed our crystal ball, as we discussed in the last episode, I think it'd be foolish to make a prediction this far in advance, but assuming these problems are just a temporary blip for Belarus Kali and for Shakhtyor financially, then you'd expect that they'll start as favourites again next term.
And I suppose that they're not our favourite team, are they, John? Neither you nor I, but you have to take your hat off to the way they've played this season. I mean, I know that we would say that there's been a number of factors working against other teams, some of those medical, some of those financial, but they are an impressive side, and I know they've been able to build an impressive side because of the huge financial power that they have with regard to signing players from abroad. But it still has to be won, doesn't it? They still have to go out there and win the league, and they've done so in style, it has to be said.
Absolutely, I agree, Liam. And looking through the side, there's some really interesting players. Chernik, the goalkeeper, I think he's better than Gutor. I think he's likely to play a bigger part again next season. One of the real success stories this season has been Gleb Shevchenko, who's really come on. Grigorchuk did great work with him. Like most of the squad, he faded away a bit when Gurenko was there, but he's really come back under Alexei Baga, and I think everyone's quite surprised how well he's done there this season and made his way into the full national team on the back of his performances. Roman Begunov's another good player. Kendish has had a stop-start season, but when he's on form, he's a real asset to Shakhtyor. I remember him standing out in the Shakhtyor of last season when he had an almost telepathic understanding of Vitaly Lisakovich before Vitaly went to Russia. So the team is full of interesting players, really good signings from the Western Balkans as well, Georgia Ivanovic, these sorts of players. So I think they'll still be interesting, whoever's there next season,
So we're deciding to change things about a bit today. We would usually have, obviously, quite a long part one when we talk about various races that are on. But this is obviously our penultimate show of the season. And so pretty much everything we want to talk about is really a preview of what's to come. So we're keeping part one short in tribute to Shakhtyor, who are our champions, and deservedly so. And we're moving straight on now to part two, and we'll talk all about the various races when we preview the next two rounds of fixtures, the final two rounds of fixtures in part three. So on we move to part two, and certainly, although we won't probably separate all of these into this middle section next week of our final show, not next week, but the next time we record, we are certainly looking for people to contribute from the wider world of Belarusian football fandom. Our last show will be a particularly long one, to go through all the details of all the season, and we'd like you to contribute. So this will probably be the last time that we ever actually sit down and have an interview of any sort with just one person. We'd like you to give your contributions about how you felt about the season, just short recordings of your thoughts on what you liked, what you didn't like, whether the season lived up to or lived down to expectations. But before we get to that in our last show of the season, it was a brilliant opportunity to talk to one more player who's not playing currently in the Belarusian league, but has been there in the past. Daniel Chalov, and John caught up with him recently, despite various interruptions caused by connections and cross waiters. He managed to have a chat with him about his footballing career.
Good afternoon, Daniel. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. You join us from Moscow, where you are now. Can I ask, are you taking a break in your football career at the moment, or are you going back to Serbia, or signing for a new club?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my secret right now, and
Okay.
and I see that in a few months later, everybody see it in my Instagram.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about things that we're allowed to talk about then, and look back at your career in Belarus. And I wanted to start by asking you how you enjoyed your time at Vitebsk and how you found playing for Sergei Mikhailovich Yazinski as a coach.
Yeah. If we speak about Belarus, I think that it's my best period in career for not only for football but for my mentality. Because I played many matches, and the Vitebsk is nice city,
Yes.
and it's so clean, and every people in Vitebsk is very simple, very kind, and it's very important that you have a nice atmosphere around you, and it was a very good period.
And what about the coaching? Did you like playing for Yazinski, or did you get on well with him?
For me, yes. For me, this coach give you a freedom from yourself. You don't think about some totalitarianism, something like that. He's like a democratic manager. Yes, and it's very important for a person like me, because I can live in some boardings and in some I can live in this situation. But Yazinski said like this. He said, I need 2 hours per day for you for working hard, and you can do everything. It's not my reason. Just make a good training and good game, and you can be everybody. You can be. I'm not. No matter that you're a person. No matter what you're doing inside, just 2 hours, and just make my ideas. Because if you make my ideas and you working hard, everybody is growing up.
Fantastic to hear from Daniel, despite the various glitches along the way. John, what did you? I mean, I found it quite amusing, the fact that he was not prepared to tell us in any circumstances where he was going next. Perhaps he's headed back to Belarus.
I don't think he is. No, I think probably he's going somewhere in Russia, but yeah, he was very secretive about his next destination. You see, Daniel, as he explained there, went to Serbia after his contract in Vitebsk ended. Unfortunately, India, the club he played for there, were relegated from the top flight in Serbia. And I thought he'd gone back to Russia to concentrate on his fashion label. I wondered if he would even play again. But I think he is going somewhere. He just won't say where quite yet. So you'll have to keep an eye on his Instagram for news on that, I guess.
Interesting sort of window into the world of following on from Daniel Sosa in terms of coaching and Jasinski's views on.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds in our terms really 1980s. I mean, I think if you tried to apply for a job even in non-league in England and said you were planning to do 2 hours a day and leave the players to their own devices for the rest of the time, you wouldn't get anywhere near the job. But Jasinski clearly packs a lot into those 2 hours, and Daniel does have a great respect for him. And of course, he was the gaffer there for the whole 2 years that Daniel was there. And a loyal Vitebsk guy, Jasinski. So that counts for a lot in Vitebsk, and you'll hear that in his comments about the city. I think what's also interesting for me, Liam, is, the strange meeting in the middle of the professional and the obsessive fan, talking to him about that win Vitebsk had last April over Dynamo Brest when Dynamo were champions, and Santos got a boy sent off, and I think won a dubious free kick or penalty. And Daniel was just looking at me with his eyes open. And it's like, God, do you remember all that? Oh yeah, we did win, right? Yeah. So it's quite funny, those sorts of encounters too.
I love that when you remember their careers better than they do. Yeah, it's just another game to him, obviously, but we're like, wow, that was amazing. That's really stood out for me. Yeah, no, it's brilliant to have him on, and we must find a way of thanking him in due course. We'll certainly be cheering for whichever team he eventually signs up for. But the mention of Jasinski gives us a perfect lead into part 3, because obviously Jasinski is now coaching the under-21s, has a game coming up, and it's with the internationals that we'll start part 3 when we come back after this very short break. So, part 3, and I think we do actually, although obviously we are all about the football. I do think at this point, John, we need to perhaps just pause for a moment and think. I mean, I'm very excited about the last 2 rounds of fixtures. I'm looking forward to seeing who finishes second, third, and fourth. I'm looking forward to seeing who doesn't play in the relegation playoff. I'm looking forward to seeing who comes up and plays in the promotion relegation playoff. Perhaps not looking forward quite so much to Wales Belarus for obvious reasons. But clearly, I think this is a point where we need to start this section just by remembering the people over in Belarus at the moment who perhaps have high priorities on their minds than we do in terms of getting through to the next day, really, in many cases.
Yes, you're right, Liam, and I think it is important just for a minute that we do acknowledge that. There was an interesting article that I put in the Twitter feed this week about the perspectives of 2 fans from Brest, one Dynamo fan and one Ruch fan. Both had a lot to say about the football, but common to their remarks was the fact that a lot of people are simply not at the games at the moment because they're worried about how to survive and their next paycheck and how they look after their families, and put that in the wider context of a skyrocketing COVID-19 problem over there. As we are recording tonight, Denis Kovba, the Vitebsk doubles coach, is in intensive care with COVID and extremely sick. He's one of many football people that have been caught up in the resurgence of the pandemic in the country. So that's very serious. And that's before we get to the situation on the border with Poland at the moment, where thousands of wretched refugees who are being used by the regime as a weapon against who they perceive as their enemies in Europe, in a terrible humanitarian situation. So set against this really grim backdrop, you can understand why for many the forthcoming internationals are of little, if any, interest.
And indeed the last couple of weeks of the season. I mean, we know from our experience that many Belarusians are not desperately interested in their own league, and it's often seen quite puzzling to us. But I suppose right now, more than ever, that interest and relevance to their everyday lives really is clearly going to be not something that's really at the forefront of their minds at the moment. But we will carry on by talking about these matches because we know that you want to talk about them. We know that you do talk about them. You want us to talk about them. And we are excited by them because that isn't our everyday existence. So we have the we have the freedom and the space to be able to enjoy these games without having to deal with some of these horrible situations that everyday Belarusian people are dealing with. So we'll start with international, but we'll keep this brief, please, John. I'm not even going to go for it. I'm not even going to go for a score prediction. I'm sad not to be going. I know you're sad not to be going, and I'll be looking forward to watching the likes of Ruslan Isakovic, who's one of the finds of the season for me. I mean, I know we were told at the start of the season that he could be a very, very good player. I remember you mentioned him in an early episode, but he is a very, very good player, isn't he? And I'm really looking forward to seeing him in action. I hope he starts. I hope he goes for it. I hope he thinks there's nothing to lose in this game, Kondratovic, and he just thinks, right, let's put all the youngsters and let's really go for it, because we're going to get beaten anyway. We might as well really see what we can do with a few of the hungry younger players.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the attitude that Kondratev instills into them. If they go there saying, well, we've absolutely nothing to lose, let's go out and play our best game. Some of us want to play in England or Germany or Italy, and one way to grab the attention is to turn over Wales in their own backyard. There might also be a sense that Wales were very lucky to win in Kazan, which they were. And there's also great uncertainty as to whether Gareth Bale is going to be fit enough or not to start the game. And of course, Gareth Bale was the difference in Kazan with his hat-trick. So for me, it depends on the mindset. If Kondratev goes there and says, just shut up shop, 4-5-1, park the bus made in Minsk across the goal and hope they can't find a way past it, they'll get filled in. So they have to go there and try and take the game to Wales, really, because Wales need the win in order to ensure that they're in the shake-up for the playoffs. And they'll be nervous. Wales have been in this situation many times before and lost many times before, famously against Scotland in 1978 and 86, and also against the Russians in 2003. So Wales will be a bit jittery, I think. And Belarus will need to exploit that. I could perfectly understand the tactic of sitting until half-time, going for 0-0 at half-time and then being a bit more adventurous after the break. But if they go there just to shut up shop and shrug their shoulders about the result because there's nothing to play for, then it really is going to put the tin lid on what has been an absolutely wretched qualifying campaign.
It's tough, isn't it, really? Because, I have nothing against Wales at all. I'm not one of those Englishmen who wishes any ill on Wales. No. So ultimately, in a way, I'd like to see them win. But I obviously want the Belarusians, you say. I mean, they're very dear to my heart, a lot of the players in the team. And I want them to go out there, as you say, and put in a really good performance. And if they're going to lose, at least go down with a fight rather than, just as you say, lamely rolling over and getting beaten 5-1. So we'll see. We look forward to it. And, I look forward to the first 20 minutes. I hope I get what I want for the first 20 minutes. If it's 3-0 after 20 minutes, I probably won't be looking forward to the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, if they have a start like they have in Kazan, then I can really see the roof coming in very, very quickly. So they need to be really disciplined and careful in the first 20-25 minutes and play on the home side's nerves. It's interesting that Chernik is back in the squad, and an addition to the squad for the first time is Artyom Sokol from Energetic. So it'll be interesting to see if he is to play any part. And otherwise, it's a pretty familiar squad. You can see Vitali leading the line again. It'll be interesting to see if he has Antilevsky or Solovai alongside him. Antilevsky's got a little bit more experience, and I don't know what you thought, Liam, about the couple of games Solovai's played already, but he hasn't looked as though he's quite tumbled to how to play at international level yet. So it'd be interesting to see if he actually gets another chance against the Welsh.
No, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because he's so impressive in the league, isn't he? I mean, we know it's all about levels, but he's so impressive that you would love him to make that step up. And yeah, he hasn't quite done it yet. I mean, I'm absolutely thrilled for Sokol, even if he doesn't get on the pitch, which he may well not do. I've rated him so highly. He's one of the few Energetic that stayed there from the first game I saw him. I mean, it's the turnover there is just quite incredible, isn't it? Really, and I've always thought, what is he doing there with the best will in the world? Why is he not playing for a bigger club? He's good on the ball. He's strong. He's got a lovely left foot. He can pass. I just. But I must admit, I didn't necessarily think he'd ever make it to the national scene. I just thought he'd probably be playing in a better side than Energetic. So I'm thrilled for him. And, even if he doesn't get on, what an experience, to be representing,
I think Kondratjev's casting the net pretty wide. I mean, I think he took the job knowing qualification was not happening. So why not try out players on the fringes of consideration and test them in games where the result doesn't really matter anyway?
I mean, let's face it, who would you rather see in that team, Bordachev or Sokol? I mean, it's
Bordachev has been dropped, and I don't think he will be seen in the Belarusian national team shirt again after that. No. It's a knockout moment in Tallinn,
No, exactly. So, I mean, Sokol is, left-sided, isn't he, obviously? So that's, it's an obvious replacement. But let's just hope he doesn't just sit on the bench for 90 minutes watching a 5-1 defeat, because that would be a bit of an underwhelming international experience for him. And I'm biased, and I want to see him on the pitch and doing what he can. So moving on, we've got some other games to preview. Obviously, we're not back now till after the end of the season. So there's 3 races that are still to go, isn't there? I know obviously the title race is done and dusted, but second to fourth remains interesting, doesn't it, John? I mean, I obviously, with my love of Gomel, would love to see them sneak into those top 3. And obviously, in deference to Bruce, I want them to finish in the top 3 as well, Dinamo and Minsk. So Bate need to drop out, but it's not looking that likely, is it, to be fair?
Now, you've made Bruce shout at his computer, Liam. That's not fair. So I can see the veins popping out in his head from here.
No, I want my top 3 to be Shakhtyor, Dinamo, and Gomel. I don't mind Bate falling out. That's fine by me.
Yeah, I would love Gomel to finish 3rd as well, actually. And I think they deserve it for the season that they've had. It'll be interesting to see what happens to them next season, whether Bionchik's still there, whether Bionchik can hold the core of that group together, and they'll be confronting difficult second season syndrome. But yes, for now, I think they could sneak into 3rd. They're at home to the already relegated Smorgon, so I can't see that being a problem. And then a really great game on the final day away at Shakhtyor, and Shakhtyor might be in 70% throttle by then, so we'll see. Dinamo at home to Neyman, and then away at Slavia on the last day, and Slavia might well need points in that game, so ideally Dinamo are going to secure their place in the top 3 from their point of view as much as they can with a win at home to Neyman, who've nothing much to play for now. Bate away at Torpedo, who've been pretty poor all season. The fact that they're in 7th place in the table after such a poor season shows, how strange the league beyond the top 4 or 5 has been. And then they've got Vitebsk at home, and I think Vitebsk went on holiday about a month ago, so they're not going to have any trouble with that, even in their parlous state. Ruch are the final ones. Well, they've got the hardest. Away to Slutsk, who are still looking for points to absolutely ensure that they stay out of 14th place. And then a Brest derby with Dinamo, which will be full of aggro and bad feeling again, and it's not the sort of game you want to be relying on for points. So it'll be hard for them.
I suppose Slutsk have got on their side the fact that they've still got the Sputnik Joker to play.
That's right.
They've still got 3 points coming out. But yeah, you're right. It is tight down the bottom. Incredibly tight. Obviously, we don't like to be left with egg on our faces. We like to think we get everything right every time. But we did write off Slavia. I seem to remember the last episode, John, and they've only gone and made the bottom, the race for the relegation playoff avoidance stakes quite interesting, haven't they, to be honest? And there's a massive game coming up the weekend after next, isn't there? On the Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Never mind high noon, it's 10 a.m. for us. Energetic against Slavia. Wow, that is as big a game as there's been all season.
Massive game. I think Slavia will be quietly confident. I mean, I watched the game with Neman Grodno at the weekend. Neman were quite lucky, I think, to draw that game. I think Slavia had a lot of the ball, a lot of the pressure. A really windy day in Moser by the looks of it. Not a very nice day for football. And just the way Timonuk took the equaliser, that extraordinary right foot through the ball from 30 yards, leaving Dudar absolutely stranded in the Neyman goal, and quite rightly awarded Goal of the Week by the Federation. So I think there's a bit of fire there with Slavia that they lacked for 2/3 of the season, and they do have a good opportunity, I think, to really take a big step forward towards safety against Energetic.
Yeah, I mean, the problem there is it's exactly the same. It's sort of replicated what happened last season, isn't it, with Energetic? Did very, very good first couple of months of the season, maybe 3 months of the season.
Yeah.
Then it up steps the transfer window, and obviously losing Vasiliev through for reasons beyond their control, as we now know. But ultimately, you can't change the entire team mid-season and expect to keep things going, and they have struggled since then. And I do worry for them because there's been talks about them, maybe not making it to next season anyway. I think to fall out of the top league at this stage would be pretty disastrous for them, to be honest. But equally, Slavia probably can't even afford to contemplate it either, given the resources that they've had available to them.
I mean, and I wonder if it would be such a disaster for Energetic. There is an argument that they're more likely to survive next season if they are relegated, because their budget, let's not forget, is $300,000 a year, which is minuscule. It's a reasonable budget for the Pershaya. I'm sure they could trim it further if they went to the Pershaya. So arguably, if we're talking about the future of the club, they'd be better off going down for a season and trying to regroup. And you get the sense also that the purpose of the club is to develop young players. And I always had the sense, watching Energetic closely in the last 2 seasons, they weren't really that bothered whether they went up or down. The purpose was to develop young players in competitive action. And I'm not surprised there's discussion about their future, because playing in front of a bus queue in Borisov, there's more policemen than spectators at those games. It's not sustainable, even in the state-run football economy in the country. So yeah, it doesn't look great for Energetic, I have to say.
No, I mean, we did predict that they would fill that relegation playoff slot, didn't we? And unfortunately, I suspect that they may well do. But we'll see what happens in due course. Obviously, we need to find out as well who they might be playing in that, because that's far from decided yet. There is also the question mark of this $1 million bond that we've talked about before. But even putting that to one side, even imagine that Krumkachi eventually decide they can't play for whatever reason in the promotion playoff game. There will be a promotion playoff game, I think, won't there? But who is going to be in that space? Because there's still quite a few teams that might have an interest in filling it.
Well, that's right. There's uncertainty over the first and third in the Pershaya table at the moment. First are Arsenal Dzerzhinsk. They're at home to Slonim this weekend. Surely they'll wrap up the title this weekend, having stumbled a bit in the last couple of weeks. A victory guarantees them the championship, basically. Yes, Bolshina could catch them mathematically, but the goal difference swing is too great. So there is this $1 million bond required by the ABFF of private clubs to enter the top flight, and we'll see if the businessmen running Arsenal want to pay it. We know almost certainly that Krumkachi simply do not have that money and have no way of raising it. And effectively, this is a rule that disbars Krumkachi for financial reasons before having to find a reason to disbar them as a result of the playoff, or relying on Energetic or FC Minsk or whoever is going to be beating them in the playoff. So yeah, we could see a situation where neither Arsenal nor Krumkachi are in the top flight next season, but Belshina and Dnieper and whoever finishes 14th in the top flight are,
But it'll be interesting one way or the other. If we assume that Arsenal may raise the money, then there is that potential for Bershini to occupy the second space, and then we would have a game probably, I think, between Dnieper and either Energetic or possibly Neeman or possibly anyone else. There's quite a few still in the mix, isn't there? So last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think Neeman are okay, but FC Minsk have a very, well, they have Isloch at home, which won't be easy, but then they're away to Smorgon. So if they need something up there, I'm sure they can get it. Energetic, Slavia at home, Isloch away. So those are the candidates for me. Really, one of those three will be in the playoff.
So by the time you next hear from us, all will be decided, probably, unless there's some courtroom drama or something. Who knows? But yeah, we'll assume that by the time we come back for our final episode of the season, we will be able to say who's in the relegation playoff and who they're playing against from the Bashaya, who's in Europe, and many other things besides. And we'll hope, as I say, to gather some recordings from you over the next 2 weeks to try and see what you made of it all. But until we see you again, that will be I'm all for now, and we'll catch up with you very soon. Thanks for listening.
Cheers. See you next time.